So the question of the day for Trusted House Painter is, how do you price your painting projects? My name is Paul. I'm your host today. And on Facebook, I see a lot of Facebook groups, painters groups that talk about the question, how do I price this job? Do I price per square foot? Do I price by job? Do I price per client? How do I price this job? It seems that pricing is a never-ending moving target out there. And it is. And in this episode, I'm going to introduce Clay Rock. Clay Rock has been on the show before. I was sitting down with Clay Rock the other day. We're reviewing a couple projects he had that he's got for the summer. And he introduced me to this kind of unique pricing matrix that he showed me that he uses, that in this video, we're going to show you a little pointer about what he uses, this pricing matrix, and how you can use it in your business. Now, you might already have a perfect business where you know perfect pricing and you've got the strategy down. And if you do, awesome. You should join trustedhousepainter.com and broadcast your business. But if you don't, if you do struggle, like me, like Clay, like most painters in this world, I've been painting for almost 20 years, this podcast is really going to help you out. So Clay, welcome to the show. How are you today, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks again for having me, Paul. I'm
Cool.
excited to be here.
Yeah, right on. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. We're sitting down the other day having a coffee. We're reviewing a few jobs, and you showed me some kind of pricing matrix. So maybe first start off why or how you came up with this pricing matrix before we show you, the viewer, the pricing matrix. Maybe explain how you came up with it or why you came up with it.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, there's so many different ways to do pricing. Usually how I do it is breaking down the numbers of hourly tasks of prep and hourly tasks of painting. I've seen some ways that some people have shared in some of the painting groups where they basically just figured out how much paint they needed, and then they times that by a formula to give like a labor budget for it. Square footage, I've done square footage pricing within new construction before. There's all sorts of ways to work the numbers. If you're proficient in Excel, you can come up with 1,000 different ways to do it. But today, we're going to cover more of the human side of pricing. Because if you don't understand the relationship that you're getting into with your client, then there is no formula that's going to figure that out for you. So essentially what we were chatting about the other day is really understanding your client's needs. So what I've experienced in the past is that I have clients that care about their painting project, and I have clients that don't care about their painting project as well. And I've also found that I have projects that I care about, and I have projects that I don't really care about. I'm sure you've had a friend call you up and just say, hey, can you come and paint my steps this weekend? I've washed them, I've power washed them. I just don't have the time this weekend. So you just need to show up and you know how to do it, and the gallon's just sitting there. So, you know, I'll do you a favor. Here you go. I showed up, put the paint on, I'm gone. Hey, by the way, there's a little bit of rotten wood on this board over here. I painted it anyways. You know, keep an eye on that. It's still safe, but it's going to break down. You don't really care about doing the best of the best job for it. So you need to understand when that's the case.
So when to drop your ego, in other words, because as painters, we take pride in our work and we want to do it right. But some clients, as you said, really don't care. And I'm not saying they don't necessarily care about the quality or they care about the paint job. But for example, a real estate agent or someone who wants to sell their house and just kind of tidy it up, for some people, that's unethical and they won't even touch that client. But in business, it's how do you serve the client, right? So let's get into this matrix.
Yeah, sure. Let's bring it up.
All right. So just walk us through what you've created here and what it means first.
Sure. So essentially on the left there's the painter's scale of caring, with 1 not caring at the bottom and 10 fully caring at the top. And then the bottom scale from left to right is how much the client cares from 1 to 10. So you'll see in the top right quadrant that the painter cares and the client cares. And obviously as a painter, these are the most enjoyable projects to work on, because especially for me, I do a lot of residential repaints. And here in Victoria, we have a lot of wood homes. Old character homes, really fancy trim, post multiple color schemes. So it's always fun to take on a project like that that the client really cares about, because it's their home, it's where they want to raise their family, they want to protect their most valuable asset. So when the client cares and then you care about doing the best job for them, then that's where you're going to be able to price a project that's going to work for both. Uh, Multiple times this spring, I've talked to a client and they turn to me and say, I don't just want any kid to show up and paint my house. I want it done right. I want it done so that it's going to last. Okay, sounds good. I need to bring in either a really high-end guy, my top guy, or I need to be here doing it myself as well because of some of the challenges with ladder movements, because of some of the challenges with rotten windows, fixing like old decrepit wood, like 10 different layers of paint that's flaking and peeling. Like, you can't just throw any young guy, any green guy on that. So when you have that client, man, you got to listen to what they're saying, because if you go into a project where the client cares and they're making it crystal clear to you that this needs to be done right and it needs to be done once, well, two negative scenarios can come out of that, which is sort of looking into the other spectrum. Is the client cares but the painter doesn't.
So now
So
we're in quadrant, the top left corner, right?
the bottom right.
Sorry, bottom right. So the
Yeah.
painter
So if the
doesn't care,
client,
but the client does care.
yeah. So if the client really cares about their house, well, two scenarios. One is the painter goes, "Oh, well, it doesn't need that type of work. So I'm just going to price it here, and then I'm going to show up and I'm going to do what's necessary. Not what you desire. I'm going to do what's necessary." So then all of a sudden the client is like, "Well, I'm not really happy with it. It seems like you're just sort of slapping some paint on and going." But the other issue that you can run into there is you care, the client cares, you price the job where you have a comfort zone to really take care of the details. But if you don't effectively communicate that to your guys and they show up thinking it's just a let's get this done quickly, like we did our last project, well, then it's going to have a breakdown because the client feels like they're paying for a premium, but then you don't deliver on that premium. So it's
Got it.
about understanding, and it's also about fulfilling on those promises that you're making to the client.
Okay.
So then in the top left, the painter cares, the client doesn't. So an
Ooh,
example of
that's a
this one would,
killer. That you'll lose money there for sure.
yeah, and we'll get onto this in the bottom left. Painter doesn't care, client doesn't care. There's more money, there's more margins in the bottom left quadrant than there is in the top left quadrant. And I'll tell you why. The top left quadrant, the client doesn't care. You're now pricing against the college kid who's knocking on the door. So you're trying to be the keg steak. You're trying to be that perfectly barbecued steak, but all they want to pay for is a fast food burger, right? So if you price down here and then you get onto the job and you're like, oh, you know what? Oh, I found this. I'm really gonna like do my best effort to make this look exceptional. And I hope that they're gonna recognize that at the end and thank me for it. But then the project gets delayed another day. So an example of painter cares, client doesn't care. You've got the property manager, you got the real estate agent. Hey, this wall is lime green and we need to put it on the market. The pictures are the company is coming on Saturday to take pictures of the house. We're putting it on the market on Sunday. If you all of a sudden put in extra care where it doesn't matter and you delay the project and you mess up with their schedule, you're going to have a bad like customer relation experience. Whereas the bottom left corner, in that exact same scenario, if you run onto a job site knowing that you're just going to get in there, get paint going, boom. I had an example of this. Property manager said, we've got this empty suite. It needs to be redone. It's just these two walls because there's holes. So when I went into the project, okay, it's just 1 gallon and it's basically filling holes, waiting for stuff to dry. Spot prime it, waiting for stuff to dry. So I had the paint. As soon as you walk in the door, tiny little front entrance. So I told my guy, while you're waiting for each step, go and paint this front entrance. We have enough paint. So the client doesn't care. We don't really care, but we were able to still do it under budget, make good coin, and make him happy. But if we go into the top left quadrant and we do that and it costs another gallon of paint, or we do that and it takes an extra day, well, then he doesn't care that we've done extra work. Whereas in the bottom left corner, if you have a client that doesn't really care, they just have specific parameters of what they need, and you can go in and fulfill on that, that is a perfect opportunity for an experienced painter to go in and do it as quick as they can and take that budget and get it done in as little time as possible and maximize their earnings. Or it's a perfect opportunity to take your new guy, your green guy, who's pretty good at what he's doing, and say, hey, I know you're good. I know you're going to make mistakes, but don't worry about it. I want you to just do this job as fast as you can. You're not here to practice quality. You're here to practice speed and efficiency. Painter doesn't care. Client doesn't care. Perfect learning experiences for new guys, or for the experienced guy, perfect experience to just go in, get it done. You don't have a client breathing down your back, pointing out this, asking questions about that. So the bottom left and the top right, those two quadrants is really where you're going to be able to create a profit margin. The other two, they require a lot more management on the job. So when the painter cares and the client doesn't, well, then you sort of got to work with your crew and yourself on that ego stuff, as you mentioned. But when the painter doesn't care and the client does, well, then the client's going to be breathing down your neck, because they're going to be, why isn't this? Why isn't that? Why isn't that? So those two, you really need to make sure that you understand the management required to go into it. But then the other ones, you should be able to hammer down exactly what project you've planned for and price it appropriately, and just show up and get going.
Now, wouldn't you say though, like, wouldn't from an argument standpoint, when a client doesn't care, generally speaking, they really don't want a high price. They really just want like a kind of slap and dash, get it on there, so they're kind of price hunting. Would that be a fair statement for clients that don't care? They're
Yep.
Price shopping.
Definitely. So if you know you can't compete on price, then you need to compete in other ways. Whereas in the top right quadrant, you can compete in other ways and create better margins for your projects. But in the bottom left, you know your price is going to be low. So how can you figure out how to make money of that? Just because your price is low doesn't mean you need to lessen your earnings. It just means you need to maximize your efficiency.
Yeah, because a couple of weeks ago we had a podcast, and I talked about what I called the production matrix, where it talked about speed and quality. So if you haven't seen that, go back to the archives on YouTube or the Academy, and you can watch that video where I talk about speed and quality. And I think a big factor in painting is understanding what this matrix that you're talking about right now, because when I first started out, I really cared about everything. I really did. Not to say that I don't care about jobs, but I've always say in business, there's only one P, and that's people. And if you're not listening to the people, then it doesn't matter. And if there's no people, then there's no buildings, there's no paint, there's no paintbrushes, there's nothing. So what I've learned over the years, in my experience, is that you got to listen to what people want. What is the client asking for? It's not what does the book standard say. What does the book say? What does the society say? It's what does my client need in this moment? I remember one of the jobs I did maybe 5 years back. It was actually, you helped me with it. It was a hair salon that just opened up their new storefront. And it was in the middle of July, or January. And it wasn't, freezing, and it wasn't snowy, but it was definitely around the 0 degree temperature. And if you're in the States now watching this, that's like 32 degrees or 30 degrees, whatever. And it was really, and they said, our grand opening is January 15th. We need the exterior painted. And, instantly my radar goes off. It's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You can't do that. This is no, 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 no. And then I thought about it, and I remember having a chat with a mentor, and they're like, Paul, what does the client need? Give them the waiver. Tell them that there is no warranty if it does fail, blah, 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 blah. And we did that, and it worked out great. And to this day, surprisingly enough, the coating is still on there, and it still looks pretty good. So I think understanding this matrix that you've laid out here will mature your pricing game as a painter, because now you get to see things for what they truly are, rather than coming forth with your opinion of what everything should be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the worst thing for anybody, for us even, is to be told what we want. So I was the exact same as you. When I first came out, it was like, wow, you know what? I really think I'm a good painter, so I'm going to start my own company, and I'm going to offer something that other people don't, because there's so many splash and dashers out there. But what if that's what the client wants? And I've priced jobs where I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I guess I'll price it at this to make it work for them, but they'll be blown away once I like do that extra step of prep that they said that didn't really matter. And then they don't care. And it's heartbreaking when you feel like you've done something amazing, and then all of a sudden people are like, yeah, but you know, you took too long. So they got a complaint. And it's like, well, don't you understand what I did? Well, sure, they understand what you did,
Yeah.
but you don't understand that they didn't ask for that.
It's funny. It's funny how you'll put in like 120 hours or 200 hours or whatever, how long in an interior, for example, and you get everything lickety split, totally perfect. And then the client says, okay, we're moving in tomorrow, and you can come back and finish the doors tomorrow or something. You come back and they've already like put dings in the walls, and the kids are playing hockey, and there's puck marks all over the wall. And it's funny, as a painter, you take pride in your work. As an artist, you take pride in what you do, and you look at it, and it's like, do you realize how long that took me to make those walls? And now you're just shooting a puck at, and they're not asking you to fill those holes or anything, but it's like, what a client does after they've paid you is none of our business. And how they treat your paint job is none of your business. And once you can overcome that, you can get to the point where you separate yourself from the outcome. And if you can listen to what the client wants, you'll be more tuned to actually delivering what the client wants. We work with Clay. You work with a lot of property managers, and some have really high expectations. And then there's others that are just like, can you come in here next week and just throw some paint on the wall? So you really need to know, I think, this matrix that you've shown here, whether your painter cares and the client doesn't, the painter cares and the client cares, the painter doesn't care, the client doesn't care, or the painter doesn't care and the client cares, really matters when you really want to hone in your pricing strategy. Now, one question I've got, actually, it came from the chat just now, is it says, here it is. What happens if your workers don't care? I guess the question would be, how do you, that'd be more of a management aspect, but what happens if your workers don't care? What do you do about that?
That's always been a challenge for me. I think when we did our financial podcast with, was it Kyle? No, when we were chatting with Greg Hill, and I asked him about the passion, and he said you can't teach passion, you can only hire it. So if your employee doesn't care, then you either need to put them underneath someone who is responsible for quality control on them, or get rid of them. But they're going to be a drain on your organization. They're going to be a drain on the people that do care. They're going to ruin your culture. For me, that's probably the biggest thing that I'm looking for in the first week or two. I don't care if you're doing great work or poor work.
Yeah.
If you care about it, then we can work on improving it. But if you don't care, well,
why are you there? Exactly. Why are you there if you don't care, right? So we got another question.
How many painters out there are experts on the heart, right? I can't teach you how to care. I can't teach you how to bring something to it. I think you made a great point that great painters have pride in their work. And I don't want people to misconstrue this as choose to care or not. I think every painter, if you're in business, you're there because you do care.
Mm-hmm.
And If you don't care, then get out of painting. Go into something that you do care about. But the painter not caring is not because of a lack of caring in this quadrant. It's an understanding of what the client needs. Do they need you to care about doing the extra step of prep work to make it last 10 years? Or do they want you to just scrape it and get a new color on it because they're putting it on the market and they're selling it?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about choosing when to care or not. It's identifying what the client needs and shifting your care from quality and my customer relationship to speed and efficiency. I care about being fast. Still care, still bring passion, still bring pride, but know when the client doesn't want you to go above and beyond for them.
Yeah, I think it's also about care and attention. So you got to add that little attention to it too. The Facebook user just commented. They said, "What are you guys talking? What are you talking about? What is the solution?" And the next question is what is the best way to understand the client? Now that is a brilliant question. That's a great question.
Yeah.
That whoever said that, awesome.
Thank you.
And you know, I'll tell you right now, what is the best way to understand the client? Well, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
One problem that I had back in the day when I started estimating and doing a lot of sales is I would come in and I'm the know-it-all. So I would enter into that, I'd meet the client and then I'd just start rambling about everything I know and what they need to do and how they need to do it. And it wasn't until, later on when I would go somewhere and someone would try and sell it to me and I'd be like, you're not listening to me.
Mm-hmm.
You're not listening. I'd go for one perfect example. I'm buying a new car. This is exactly what I wanted. And nobody would listen. Oh, you need this. You need this. Well, if you want to do this, you need this. And I wasn't listening. So to answer your question, what is the best way to understand the client is I would say, listen to the client, literally show up. I show up with a clipboard and a pen. I introduce myself. I give my card. I say briefly, we already had a conversation. I kind of determined the basics in the phone call or the email. And from there, I say, what do you want? And then I go through my list of questions that I've got prepared. Maybe we'll do a podcast on these list of questions that I've got that really help the homeowner determine what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And then with those responses, I literally write them all down. And I'll tell you an example here in a few seconds. But Clay, what's the best way you think to understand what the client wants?
Yeah, it's finding out exactly what they need out of the painting project. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So when you're trying to identify the painting project that you need to quote, pretty much all painters are going to be able to go in, look at it and go, this needs this, this, this in terms of prep work. And then I can paint it. The best product is this. They know how to price the best project for the client. But finding out what the client needs is more about having them explain what the project is to them and you just giving options. So I've done siding where I lost out on a job. My price was too high. She said I was $3,000 over budget. And I said, well, I'm going to wash and then I'm going to sand and then I'm going to paint. So I had $3,000 allocated to sanding. I lost out to a company who said, I'm going to wash and then I'm going to paint, no sanding. So I gave her the price of what I thought she needed, but she went with the company of what her needs were. So for her, it just needed to get done. When we talked about sanding, she was like, I think it's going to be good enough quality. So for her, price was a big thing. So let's jump into the triangle there, because when you're trying to learn what your client needs, essentially you're trying to identify 2 of 3 things. The client can always pick 2, and then you get to pick the 3rd. So you want to jump into that?
Yeah, sure. But first, I'd just like to say, and a perfect example that I had of listening to the clients, and I can't express this more, just listen to your clients, talk little, write down all of the details. I'll tell you the perfect example. I did a quote for a job. It was a typical house, just small little house, it's probably about $7,000 price. But it was on a major street, 2 lanes of traffic going left, right, and center. And throughout the whole time, he was talking about his dogs. All he cared about was that the gate was closed so that his dogs wouldn't run out onto the road. That's all this guy said over it. Make sure your crew does this. Oh, and please close the gate as we went into the backyard. And I wrote that down. And I gave him his price, and it was a little high, but he was kind of needy in a way. He cared about his home. He wasn't selling his home. It had a lot of prep.
Yeah.
Long story short, I didn't get the job. He didn't go with us. And he said, Paul, you were just too high. I went with somebody else. Well, it's probably about 2 months later, a friend of mine, to preface this, the quote came from a referral, a friend of mine. So that's how I got this referral of a job.
Okay.
Well, 2 months later, this friend said to me, hey, Paul, you know what? I said, what? He said, they hired another company and they left the gate open. And the dog ran across the road and got killed.
Whew.
So it's like the most important thing that this client wanted
Has nothing to do with painting.
had nothing to do with painting. And yet the client, maybe the estimator listened, but didn't communicate that to the workers. And they must have left the gate open. The dog came out, ran across the road, and got hit by a car. There's nothing worse than that. So that's just one example of how you can just simply listening and taking notes and then communicating exactly what that emotional attachment of that client has with their home, relay that on to your workers. Because the minute you leave the job site, if those workers aren't aware, you're screwed. Yeah. So that's just an example of how listening to your client will really help you out, and then relaying that onto your painters. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not about the paint job. And if a homeowner's giving you crap and giving you shit and giving you, like, you feel like they're unloading on you, I'll tell you this now. You're doing them a service because someone in their circle, someone in their household doesn't listen to them. So don't take it personally. We'll do a podcast on that, totally, completely separate, completely separate one. But let's talk about that triage that you're talking. So this is the pricing triage that you mentioned just 2 seconds ago about a client can only have 2 of the 3. Now explain what you mean by this, client.
Yeah, so this is something that I probably learned about 4 or 5 years into actually pricing. I started my company with no pricing, no sales experience, and did a lot of studying and reading on it. But I was blown away as soon as this was told to me, and I just sort of stopped the conversation and I need to write this down. So the client can only pick 2 of these 3. If they want to, so the scheduling would be like a real estate sale. We take possession on this date on the Monday, and the movers show up on a Saturday. So it has to be done between Monday and Friday. Or you could start anytime you want, but our store location, like the hair salon, grand opening is January 15th. So it has to be done by that date. So scheduling, we have a lot of clients who are like, oh, it just needs to be done this summer. Anytime works for us. Just let us know. So scheduling is something that I always ask right off the bat. Hey, I need a paint job done. Okay, great. Do you have a deadline for it, or is it just something that you're looking to have done like right away? And sometimes I don't even quote jobs. Oh, it needs to be done by next week. And I'm like, yeah, we're super busy. I'm sorry. And maybe share some numbers of some people or send them to Trusted House Painter to try and find somebody. So the scheduling is something that the client either has in mind or doesn't. When they do have a schedule set, we have to fulfill on that promise. If it's not going according to plan, then we need to throw extra labor at it to make sure we meet our deadline. So you got to prepare for that.
So in other words, if they have a deadline, they're in need of something. Therefore, correct, they control that aspect of this triage. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if scheduling is their highest priority, then you need to figure out which other one cares. Because you say, well, if you want it done by then, well, what are your expectations? And do you want us to just get color on, or do you want us to like fix this properly and paint it? If they want a great job and scheduling, then you're like, well, that's a lot of work in a short time. This is what it's going to take. You control the price. But if they're saying it's got to be done in this time, but we have a limited budget, then you can go, well, I would usually like to do this and this and this. But if that's all and this is your timeline, well, all I can really offer you is this level of quality. So if they want you scheduling and pricing, then you control the quality. because as we discussed earlier, if you put your guys on a tight budget, on a tight timeline, and they overstep the boundaries of quality, well, then you lost the project. So you got to make sure you're controlling that third aspect. So if someone says, man, this has to be done perfectly, you're like, okay, when does it need to be done? Doesn't matter. Okay, well, I'm going to price it for the quality that you want, but I'm going to fit it into our schedule when I know we can be here to make sure that we take care of it. But if they're like, it has to be done right and it has to be done by this Friday, well, then you're like, okay, well, if you need to hijack my entire crew to get the quality that you want and the schedule that you want, well, then this is the price that it's going to take in order to do that. So with my quoting, I've always got labor, I've always got materials, and I've always got cost of business. And cost of business is a lot of different things, which is where understanding what quadrant you're working in and understanding what the client wants out of these three options, that's where your cost of business comes in, and what is it going to take in order to actually get a painting project done. So if they want schedule and they want quality, you can pick your price. And if they don't like it, well, okay. If they want the right price and the right schedule, well, then you need to control the quality that you can fit into that budget. If they want the quality and the pricing, then they can't really dictate where the scheduling is going to be on that.
Yes, I see.
So in this, did I cover all of them going around?
I think so. So in this, for those listening that don't have a video aspect to this podcast, this triangle, this triage is pricing, quality, and scheduling. And what you're trying to say, Clay, is that the client can only pick two, realistically. Now, they could technically wait it out, but if they've got a scheduled date that they need it done by, then they're going to have to accept a certain price point, right? Is that basically what you're trying to say?
Yeah, and they can shop the market for that price. You know, if someone just needs to make rent by the end of the month, and I've been there when I started, then I'm willing to price that for what it is that I need to do it. But also, I didn't understand this way of identifying the client's needs back then. So they controlled the schedule. And then they also controlled the price because of my lack of experience in actually pricing, because I had my own needs. So my ego jumped into the equation. So the worst thing as a painter is to be stuck on scheduling and to be stuck on quality and to price it wrong. So you work your ass off to get it done. And then at the end, it's just like, man, the rewards for what I did are so minimal that it wasn't even worth it.
And it's frustrating.
Let me throw this out as a question to painters. Anyone ever worked their ass off on a project and like beat up their bodies and needed time to recover afterwards, and you couldn't because you didn't make enough money on the project? Pretty sure everyone's been there.
And if you haven't, you got a little bit to go, because I still make some mistakes, and not every job is a juicy job. But got another question from the Facebook user here. Thanks for all your questions. If you've got any questions, put them in the chat. We'll respond to them as soon as we can. The question is it important to explain our process to the client and how we are going to do the job?
Yes. Critically important, because that will allow them to understand what the pricing is. But you cannot do that right off the bat. You need to find out what the client wants. And in terms of prep, in terms of the painting, give them options. Do you want us to wash and scrape, or do you want us to wash and scrape and sand and vacuum up our dust? So once you identify exactly what they want in that sales conversation, then I always save that step for absolute last. Just sort of, okay, I think I understand everything that you got here. And then you pull out your pad and you go, so, and actually, oh no, this is the wrong pad. Then you go, so you want 2 coats on this, and you want an option on what it would be to also do this. And then with this, you just need to get the railings painted, but the wood, you really wanted the extra pep. Did I miss anything? And as soon as you identify all those different aspects that they've covered, and Paul, you taught me a great lesson here, use their own words. So if they're saying, scraping and I would say palm sanding, well, then use what their words are back to them because they understand their words. You don't want to lose context. But going over everything, and then at the end of that, letting them know what the prep work is. As I shared, a lot of the times my discrepancy in price is the prep that I do. So I always let them know. So in order for me to do this, what I'll need to do is come in and scrape and then sand and then prime. And after prime, I'm going to do some caulking. And we want to do the caulking first so that we can put the paint over top of the caulking. And we always clean up our stuff. So we vacuum any dust, blah, blah, blah. So that's where you layer on your process and say, because we do those extra steps, our price might be higher than others. And if you want to compare our price to someone else's, I'd be happy to review their details and see what we're doing and what they're not doing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So the question was, is it important to explain our process to the client and how we're going to do the job? I would say it's the most important. Here's a $50 tip for anybody listening. Do you explain your process to the client? In the interview, it's all about listening to what the client wants. This is my opinion. This is what works for me. Listening to what the client wants and not selling your business so much. It's like Clay says, it's at the end of the process, the interview, that you really want to review what they said and then clarify it. In my opinion, your quote that you send to them should be the story of your prep. Again, you can go into the depths of your process. Because what that does is that shows the client that you care and that you're on it and that you have nothing to hide. Again, listen to the client's needs. Are they asking you for that? They may not be asking you for what your process is, but if they're hinting towards how would you do this or what you do up there, that is your opportunity to what I call add value to your business, because it's not about the process, it's about the value. It's the benefit of the benefit. Mm-hmm. So when a homeowner wants their house painted, truly, they don't want their house painted. They want a beautiful home. They want to have neighbors that are like, wow, your house is beautiful. Man, look at that rose garden. And it's the same with everything. It's the story that we live our lives. And each customer is a story. Customer's not always right, but they're always the hero of their story. So do you explain the process to them? Yes, if they're asking for you. But your estimate sheet, and this is my opinion, your estimate sheet, when you follow up with your estimate, it should be thoroughly detailed of your prep process, your painting process, your details, the warranty process. It should lay out the story for them. So when they skim through it, they can read the thoroughness and the detail of it. Because if you're putting thoroughness and detail into your pricing sheet and it's 3 pages long, and then you attach, a list of 5 references, they have everything they need to make a decision. And so that's one way of not wasting too much time on an estimate. When I first started, I'd spend an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours on an estimate, and I may not get the job. So it's kind of a waste. So you got to, know when to talk and when not to talk. But a great way to tell them your process is in your estimate and when you send it to them. And also on your website. If your website has a how we do it or our process, you can always put that link in the email that you send to them. And that allows them to not have to listen to you talk like you're listening to me talk right now. You don't have to listen. They can take their own time in the privacy of their own home when they have on their break or whatever, and they can skim through and actually read how your process is. So that's what I would recommend to that Facebook user that asked, is it important to explain our processes to the client? Some clients don't care. So it goes back to that grid. Let's go back to that grid. Does the client care? Let's show you exactly what that grid was there.
Well, yeah, similar to the quadrant with the triangle, the client does care, but they care about some things more than others. So yes, you sort of need to understand them enough to be able to figure out where they're going to plop onto that quadrant.
Okay, and so for this other triage question here, is there a time that the client can actually pick all of them?
When I was first introduced to this, I used to try and solve that riddle myself. And off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure. I guess it would be if you're starting out and you have no work, right? If you got no work and you need to get a job done, then you need to sacrifice something in order to get the job. And
So
what is
beggars
that?
can't be choosers.
Probably total control of all three.
So
I think I've done that before.
once you're an
Sorry?
established painting business, then essentially it comes down to this, and
Yeah.
the client can kind of choose either pricing and scheduling, or scheduling and quality, or quality and pricing, and that's pretty much it. Like,
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that you need to fulfill on the other one. If someone says, hey, I got $50,000 to paint this thing and I need it done perfect, and I was told that you're a great painter, but it needs to be done by Friday, and you're like, well, I'm pretty busy, so thanks for the offer, but the scheduling doesn't work for me.
yeah,
So also think of like in terms of this, the client can control too, so that you can accurately understand your pricing that you can give, so that you can prepare you and your team for a great job. But you can also look at this in terms of what the client's needs are and decide whether you're able to fulfill on that for somebody.
mm,
Hey, I don't care about the job, and it can be done anytime, and just let me know what the price is. Well, I've had like nurseries that I've done for people, and that was the parameters, and great clients, and I knew that I could go and do it, and in and out, like get it done pretty quick and make some decent coin.
yeah,
But then I would have to fit it in around my schedule. I'd have to set up my guys and go, and then it would take time at the paint store to get the perfect pink color for them. And um, just letting them know sometimes, hey, yeah, I can do that, but you might be able to get it done cheaper from somebody else.
yeah,
And
because
like,
it is the open market, and in the painting
yeah,
world, there is always what they call the chuck in the trucks. I learned that from Brandon Lewis, the Painters Academy. He
yeah,
called it the chuck in the truck. The guy that's not licensed, the guy that's not a painter, he shows up in a truck and he underbids everybody. And there will
yeah,
always be that individual.
yeah,
And there's nothing wrong with that, because as you mentioned about the restaurant industry, it's all food, but some are cheap, some are expensive. Some have cheap products, and others are organic meats with nice glass of red wine and ambiance and service and professionalism. And
yeah,
in the painting world is very similar to that. And you need to understand that not all painting jobs are the same, and not all painters are your competition. And
yeah,
that's kind of what we here at the Academy at Trusted House Painter want to help foster and encourage painters to understand is that their business, although it's not usually unique, if you find your targeted market, if you find who you serve, you can become unique, and that's where you can excel. So what do you think about this matrix, watching the show right now, listening to the podcast? What do you think about this? Do you agree with this? Do you disagree with this? Do you have other pricing strategies that you use that really help, that are like no brainers? Because I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and what Clay mentioned to me was kind of I've thought about it and I've felt it before, but I've never seen it presented this way. So in this podcast, Clay, I really appreciate you showing us these two different this pricing triage and the pricing matrix of whether the client cares and you don't, or vice versa, and how you can shape your pricing so that you can get more jobs, and so that you're more clear on what's expected within the relationship, because not everybody cares about quality, not everybody
yeah,
cares about pricing, right? I've had clients that just say, Paul, don't care, shoot me an estimate,
yeah,
because they know that there's a cost to screwing up, there's a cost to hiring the wrong painter.
yeah,
And that could be the cost, like the physical cost of the paint job. It could be the cost of a poor failed paint job. It could be the cost of a relationship within the household, a husband and wife get into arguments all the time because the crew that's there, so it could be a relationship between you and your neighbor, because because the painters were loud and they had a stereo and they were smoking, and whatever the reasons are, there's going to be a cost. And so I've had some clients that just say, Paul, just get it done and send me the invoice. And of course, it's not an opportunity to gouge, because you're not going to be in business for that long.
no,
But
no,
it's an opportunity to charge what you're worth, and then build that relationship. And at the end of the day, that's all business is a relationship management. So at Trusted House Painter, we want to bridge that gap between homeowners and painters. You run your business and you make a lot of money and be profitable in a world, and create trust within communities. So anyways, Clay, is there anything you want to wrap up with this podcast?
oh, we can go for hours on this type of stuff. So I think calling it right there would be probably a good idea. Hopefully we can get some more feedback from people about what they like, what they don't like, some other questions. I'd love to go deeper on some of this stuff. Probably each one of these quadrants, we could do examples of projects that we've done in the past and how they've worked out, what we've learned about them. We just went through a project in the top right quadrant, and the client said to me, because we talked about, it's quite detailed what we were planning on doing. And probably the best way for them to do it is to hire someone hourly at a cheap rate to get that done, because we were doing some stripping and they wanted to take like old wood down to stain grade quality. And there was like rotten wood in places. And I was trying to talk them out of it because I knew I wouldn't be able to fulfill on that promise. I couldn't create the beauty that they anticipated. And I knew that the price in order to do it was going to be so outrageous. So we were in the top right-hand quadrant, and I suggested maybe go down that route. And they said, we've hired students to do painters for us before, and we'll never do that again. We need a professional on this project. We weren't the cheapest bid. We were the more expensive one. They went with us. You've heard me rant about this project. Absolutely everything went wrong on this project.
But if you can be the hero and clean that up and make it right, they're going to be your best sales agents, and they're going to talk to you.
Exactly my point. They cared. We cared. They recognized that we cared. Everything that came up, we were open and honest about it. Hey, this is what's happened. Here's what we're going to do about it. Hey, when we were up here, we found this. This is what we're going to do about it. We understood that nurturing the relationship with those clients was more important than making money on that project. Because if we had done a great job and not nurtured that, then they would have gotten to the end and felt like we weren't working with them on the project that they wanted. So they cared, we cared. The house now looks amazing. And like you say, it's created a story. So
exactly. And so to finish it off, I'd say probably the worst experience I've had with a client, that client turned out to be the biggest sales agent. I'll talk to you about that on another podcast.
Glasses.
To it. But it is. It's right? Like I had to replace all the windows on a house. Long story short, there was a little tiny scratch on one of the kitchen windows from one of the guys that did a hand sand up on the window. And it extended because you said, yes, it's us. And I admitted it was us and that, I wasn't there. It just extended to, anyways, long story short, I got like probably $300,000 worth of jobs in the following year. And when I followed up with those clients, I said, how did you hear about us? And always they said, oh, our niece so-and-so recommended you. And I was like, oh no, they want their windows painted too. That's what jumped in, or they want their windows replaced too. So that's kind of, that was the monkeys talking in my back. But at the end of the day, some of my worst clients have actually turned out to be the best sales agents because I took that time to clean it up. So that's what we'll do a podcast on soon. We had a Facebook user just say, how about a podcast on how to appear more professional? So we will do a podcast on how to appear more professional. And
Sure.
If you've got any questions, if you've got any comments, or if you would like a copy of this triage or this matrix, you can just send us an email at support@trustedhousepainter.com. That is the main email that if you've got any questions about the app, trustedhousepainter.com, or the academy, or anything to do with painting, or you want to learn more, you want to be on this podcast, you want to talk about some experiences you have some information to give, by all means, just shoot it to support@trustedhousepainter.com. We're here for you. It's a community. It's an online community that helps painters grow. It helps painters build trust within their marketplace. So Clay, thanks again for being on the call and showing us this little tip for how to price a job and some of the, because once you get pretty close to where you are with pricing, it's just tiny little tweaks that really end up making the difference. So I really appreciate you being on the call, and we'll do this more often every Saturday, and we'll do a call. And like I said, maybe next week we will do about how to appear more professional. So stay tuned to the Academy at Trusted House Painter.
As soon as I heard that, my mind started going. So I started making some notes. We should definitely do that one. But quoting as well, professionalism, quoting, there's so much there to learn that you don't get out of painter training, and that's where we want to help people. If you're a great painter and you just want to step up in the industry, then add that business knowledge to yourself, add that professionalism to yourself, and offer that to your clients. And we're here to help everyone every step of the way.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for being on the call, Clay, and thank you for watching. Thank you for the comments from the users at Facebook and YouTube. And like I said, if you got any questions, you can email us at support@trustedhousepainter. Otherwise, you have a great weekend, everyone. And thanks again for being on the call, Clay, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks again, Paul. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
see you guys later. Ciao.